Welcome to Self-Centered Living, a podcast that serves as a vital platform for women of color to take charge of our narratives and where our voices are amplified. I'm your host, Trish, and here we delve into our diverse experiences and rich humanity through a blend of personal stories and insightful discussions with a range of guests. Our aim is to foster meaningful connections and understanding among our listeners. In today's episode, I speak with Dara Cooper, co-founder of the National Black Food and Justice Alliance. This coalition of Black-led organizations is dedicated to cultivating Black leadership, supporting Black communities, and organizing Black self-determination while establishing institutions for food sovereignty and liberation. The organization's focus on design and structural aspects of activism is what captivated me. In a time when traditional frameworks are disintegrating, we have an opportunity to set vision and create new realities, a theme to our discussion. Dara shares her vision for a just and equitable food system as we explore these topics. She emphasizes the importance of building structures that support Black communities today, as well as sets the foundation for future generations. As this is Self-Centered Living, and Inward Dive, this journey is highlighted, including her transformative decision in 2022 to step back from her executive director role, a move supported by the organization and leading to invaluable insights, one of which is the support necessary for nurturing our well-being while actively contributing to community needs. I invite you to listen to discover how Dara found flow and integrated creativity in her activism, fostering community engagement at a visceral level. Reflect on Dara's relationship with her story and consider what causes ignite your passion. What pivotal moments have inspired you to explore innovative approaches in your pursuit? I am fortunate to be chatting with Dara Cooper today, co-founder of the National Black Food and Justice Alliance, a coalition of Black-led organizations and farmers amplifying, organizing, and building institutions for Black sovereignty and land justice. Welcome. I'd love to go into the National Black Food and Justice Alliance with you, and you're beginning with the organization.
Before I do that, I always like to start out with knowing a little bit about your formative years. So thinking from age 0 to 7, what was shaping you? Looking at family, looking at where you were residing, looking at the community that was around you. What was Dara Cooper's formative years like?
Thank you. It is an honor to be here. I'm grateful for this question because I get to give homage to the beautiful people who helped to shape me. And so the first is my grandmother who helped to raise me. Her name is Ernestine Perry. In my culture, we say Bara Tarun, which means may she rest peace and light to her spirit. She's transitioned. But I have memories and memories of stories about myself as a very, how do we say this? A very inquisitive child, very bold child. And my mother, Ifalola Omobola, they both believed deeply in making sure that children were supported in their curiosity, right? So if I asked questions, I was never punished for questions. It was always them doing the best they can to teach me, answer the questions, or encourage me to do research to figure it out. So I was born in Atlanta, also raised in Cleveland, Ohio, and Canton, Ohio. Did a little time in Memphis, Tennessee. And then Chicago is where I claim most all of those places before age 7, by the way.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, most of them. And then
A lot of
went to high
movement.
school. So a lot of moving around. And my grandmother, though, was in Cleveland, Ohio. So I spent some time with her there. And then Chicago is mostly what raised me. But I do have a memory I want to share because I do think it was formative. So my grandmother and my mother used to tell me that I used to have this tent. And if I did anything, they were not allowed to touch me in the tent. Like that was my safe space.
Hey,
So I could do whatever, come back to my tent. They weren't allowed to touch me. And so I wonder if that planted some seeds in me to be audacious, to be able to be daring, to be able to be bold. Like I was, I was able as a young Black girl child to be, very bold, very outspoken. And I have memories of that being very supported, not to shrink, to be big in myself, not to be punished for my bigness, And I give a lot of credit and gratitude for my mother and my grandmother for that. My grandmother was a counselor. She was a union organizer and also an English teacher too. So lots of fun stories about her, but just deep gratitude to the community who helped to raise me. And also, I have to say, in Chicago, I also remember going to meetings around the anti-apartheid movement too. So, and then meetings and like Kwanzaa celebrations. So a lot of that had a lot of influence on me too. And so my mother and my grandmother raised me, but community also raised me. I had a very vast network of community who helped
Now,
to
were
raise
you
me.
the only child?
At the time, yes. So my mother had children later. I was about 9 or 10 when she started having more children. So I was kind of raised as an only child-ish, but also like with friends as my siblings
Yeah.
too. So yeah.
I appreciate this tent. I'm going to call it the magical tent. Can't touch
Mm,
me in here. The establishment of the importance of safety
yeah.
and being able to establish it for yourself
Mhm,
is so fundamental and important.
mhm.
So you moved around a bit. You had these two powerful women raising you and raising you in a way that you don't have to shrink. Talk to me now about the National Black Food and Justice Alliance and how that came about and how you became a co-founder.
Well, I think there's a connection. I'm being sarcastic. I know there's a connection. But yeah, well, the direct connection that I see too, I would say is, a friend helped me realize something that I think I take for granted, which is if there's a problem, we have agency to do something about it, and especially together, right? And so that is something I've always known. And I think, again, back to the anti apartheid movement, seeing a lot of the successes come out of it, knowing that you can come together, impact culture. I remember TV seeing everywhere anti apartheid, posters and songs and all, so you could do something about it and actually enact change. And especially with other people has always stuck with me. And that conditions don't have to be the same. They don't have to be what you experience them to be, and we can actually do something about it. So agency and power building has always been deeply important to me. So when it comes to food justice, there are so many entry points that I have come to food justice, which I may share if we have time, if you want to know, but particularly understanding how Black people have been displaced from land and also disconnected from our ability to feed ourselves is something that has always been really present for me. In addition to growing up on the south side of Chicago and seeing the drastic difference in the grocery stores in Black neighborhoods versus white or more affluent non-Black neighborhoods, right? And the same grocery chain I would see has the same product, but in Black neighborhoods, they would be just old and gray and disgusting, right? And offensive. Same grocery chain. And I remember seeing this growing up, right? And noticing something's just not right, or that this is unfair, rather, right? And I noticed it was related to race. So I've always carried that, and also just, yeah, so much in terms of who has access to what kind of resources, what have you. So fast forward later, I ended up working in Chicago to lead with Sheila Muhammad and other activists a mobile market in Chicago to work with local farmers to bring fresh produce on the west side of Chicago. We turned a public bus into a grocery store. So that was one of the most amazing career moments of my life for many reasons, mostly organizing with folks on the west side of Chicago. And so having that experience, I'm in New York and meeting with other activists at this conference called Bugs. So it's Black Farmers, Urban Gardeners, and they bring together a lot of younger farmers, but just farmers from all over and urban gardeners from all over. It started in New York, but it started being national. And every year I would hear these issues from farmers or people as if it was just them experiencing it. And as somebody who has had a lot of experience in the Midwest, in the South, now on the East Coast, I saw a trend with, you know, uh, not only what was happening to us in terms of displacement and things of that nature, but also what we could do about it. And these are systems that were impacting us. It's not just one-off things, reasons why our seeds are sterile, reasons why Black people have some of the highest rates of heart disease and saturation of junk food in our communities and fast food. None of that is by accident. And so it was always very clear to me that we have to be able to recognize those systems that are in place to see why we're in the conditions that we're in. And also, we have to connect with other people in order to do something about that, right? And so we got together. Beatrice Beckford is an activist out of New York. Malik Yakini, who at the time was the executive director, co-founder of the Detroit Black Community Food Security Network, obviously out of Detroit. And so we decided to come together with other activists and other folks who were doing really important work all over the country. And like, let's bring people together. Let's start talking about how do we build out a network that could support not only a shared analysis around what's wrong, but we want to know what we're going to do about it, right? And so when we think about the scale of the issues that our folks are facing, it's going to take some really serious coordination amongst our organizations. And that's what we set out to do with the National Black Food and Justice Alliance. Interestingly enough, exactly 10 years ago, by the way. So this is our 10-year anniversary. Beatrice Beckford, myself, and Malik Yakini, we started around 2014. And then we started convening around 2015. And then in 2016, we brought everybody together in Penn Center. So that's like the official birthing of the organizations coming together in person. But we had been doing a lot of stuff virtually up until then. So
Okay. Okay. Beautiful. What I like, and I found some parallels, this idea around, okay, there's a fight, but that there's also the creation of a vision. I find that you speak to that really well. I want you to go into that a little bit more.
the vision.
Balancing both, but
That-
really knowing the importance of this vision piece. I will tell you that from my time in corporate, just working with leaders, quote unquote, the part that they fall down on often is creating a compelling vision and understanding how important that skill and vision is to pull people forward. We can talk all day about what's not going right, and we can have a strategy and a game plan, but this piece is the pull through. I find that you speak to that very well.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I am incredibly excited about possibility and imagination, which is what it takes to get us to victory, right? We have to have creativity. We have to have imagination, which, by the way, at some point, I would like to talk about attention capturing that I'm concerned about right now. But the most critical thing that we need is imagination, right? In addition to obviously our relationships, those are really important too. But the vision the beautiful thing to me about the National Black Food and Justice Alliance is that it's a weaving of so many people's vision together. And it's a culmination of our ancestors' vision too. Like we're on a road that has been long paved before us. And it's our responsibility to get as much insight as possible. That old Sankofa, look back, learn from the past as much as we can, learn from our elders, learn from our colleagues, right? As we move forward together, right? And so we have to be really good at listening to each other. We have to be really creative and imaginative. And what this vision for the National Black Food and Justice Alliance culminated into or ended up creating, and let me also say that it's iterative. It's always it's ongoing. The more people chime in, the more textures and layers of this vision. But as we started, there were several things that we imagined and that we still can see as possible. So what's possible when we build what we call a self-determining food economy? What that means is when we can build an economy and make sure that we have the infrastructure to connect our dollars to make sure that we are engaging Black farmers, engaging Black distributors, engaging Black cooperatives. And we're not thinking about this as a sort of individual way, but we have this network where we understand that we can collectively own the means to be able to feed ourselves. And what does that mean? What does that look like? In addition to cultural work, right? Where we know we now have this infrastructure where Black farmers are thriving. They have access to land, they have seeds, they have training programs, they have this abundant production of incredibly delicious produce that's available. We also have value added things, all those things. And then we have the means to get that to the table to our folks, right? Now we can have this deliciousness all we want, but if we don't have the cultural shift, because what we also know is that our folks are saturated by junk and, advertisements and what have you. And so there's this brother, Etaf, DJ Cable Motivation, who is amazing. Hopefully I'll send it to you. But he does a lot of, I'll show you, I'll send you a picture. But
Okay.
he has these like organic seeds, and he's a DJ and an MC. And he has all these songs about like gangsta gardening and growing your own food, eating healthy, all those things. I'm bringing him up because the cultural work to make life-giving food, like reclaiming life-giving food back as a tradition, as a culture, is what's exciting and so necessary as a part of this vision, right? So we have the good stuff, that infrastructure. And let me also say this is a vision because there's a lot of work to get to that infrastructure that we need to make sure that we're actually producing, distributing, cooking, preparing, all the things that are life-giving for us, and also shifting the culture to like get rid of all the things that we've been indoctrinated around, right? We've been taught so many things that are just quite frankly not true and quite frankly very destructive. So we have this exciting cultural work that's happening to shift what we understand as Black culture and shift it towards something that's more life-giving, shifting towards healing work, and all kinds of things. Also, there's a lot of indoctrination. This is worldwide, and for very strategic reasons, to disconnect us from the dignified labor of working with the land, connecting to the earth, right? People call my family crunchy granola for so long. We got made fun of for so many different reasons.
And was this because you were harvesting, like harvest to table, and it was whole foods that you were eating?
Yeah, look, I grew up on avocado toast, right? Before it became hot. Why? We were low income. We didn't have a lot of money. But we
Okay.
ain't had no butter. We ain't had no peanut butter. We had a piece of avocado and a piece of bread and made that thing into some avocado toast when I was like little, right? And so like we had what we had in order to eat as well as possible, right? Given the resources we had. But yes, to your point, I don't know why they said crunchy granola, but I actually love granola. No shade.
I
But the things that we adopt culturally to denigrate the things that are actually really good for us is heartbreaking, right? And it's something that we need to pay attention to, especially amongst young people, but generally all the way around. Like, oh, grown-ups do this too, right? But the cultural work that we have to do to disconnect from the harmful things that we've been indoctrinated around in terms of what is Black food, what is Black culture, all these things, um, to make sure that our definitions are actually feeding, nourishing, and healing us, right, as opposed to harming us. And so that's a lot of the vision with the National Black Food and Justice Alliance is around creating an economy rooted in nourishment. And we don't just want access to a thing, because what we were always very critical of is these conversations around so-called food deserts. Some of us talk about it in terms of food apartheid, but whatever it is, the point is that a lot of the time, the framing is around the fact that we don't have access to grocery stores, right? And what we always started with being very critical of accessing markets that are not concerned about us. Not only not concerned about us, but are, as I talked about earlier, you see these same corporate grocers offering different products based on race. And so a lot of these grocers are not only very disrespectful to our people. So why are we going to fight for access to their disrespect? So that's number one. And number two is we're not interested in replicating an economy where there's still private ownership and exploitation, right?
Mm,
Because we have borne the brunt of that, right,
that's
in the
right.
past. So we don't want to recreate that.
Mhm.
But we want to be creative and understand what it means to collectively own, collectively, and really dig back into and reclaim cooperatives, right? And so that's where the self-determining food economies work comes into play. It's mapping where are Black farmers? How do we even know where to find them? Um, and then connecting to distribution places, and then really reclaiming Black co-op work in terms of Black co-op distribution, grocers, community land trusts, or community control of, or and control is, we community reconnection back to land, sustainable reconnection back to land. And so that's a lot of the work that we envisioned is sustainable access to land, training programs, just a thriving community of intergenerational wisdom. When we started, we had from 17-year-old to 80s in the room as our founders,
I love
right?
that.
So intergenerational brilliance has always been so important to us culturally and also for the purpose of like having the best, most brilliant, most energy, we want all the energy, we want all the insights, we want all the lessons in the room to make sure that we have the best thinking possible. And so that's a lot of what went into this sort of collective vision around what's possible when we own and control together our destiny to be able to nourish ourselves.
I love the fact that there is this big focus on the cultural reclaiming and shift. To your point, without that, a lot of this other stuff, maybe it gets done temporarily, but it's not sustainable. It's really changing these minds or bringing them back to how things might have been in the past. Your work with the Alliance has evolved and shifted. As you have evolved and shifted, you've been good at synthesizing all of these different inputs and ideas, which to me seems overwhelming. Here we sit in a democracy and we can't even get that right. So I don't know what it's like in the room when you're trying to collaborate and get all these ideas. It's what we're going for. It's aspirational, but nonetheless, it's challenging. What was your experience like at the National Black Food and Justice Alliance? How has that shaped you?
In terms of how was my experience overall, or are you interested in my shift?
We'll come to your shift,
Okay, great.
but I want to understand your initial time because now you're an advisor. I'm looking at all it takes to, again, synthesize all these different ideas. Also, it being a nonprofit,
Yeah.
that's certainly challenging. And so we like to focus on the inside story and how these things have
Mm.
shaped you. I was just curious to how your time with the organization has changed over time, understanding that we're not, static beings. We're shifting and changing too.
Yeah. Thank you for that question. Honestly, it's complicated, meaning, I mean, there's so many layers. One layer is I'm very proud of the work.
I hear that.
I'm
I hear
proud.
yeah,
You tell.
yeah, just a little bit.
I am because, for many reasons. One is I'm a movement person. I believe in, and not even believe in. I know in all my knowing that it is our responsibility to fight for what's ours, right? And fighting means fighting against, and it also means it's our responsibility to create the conditions that we know our people deserve. One of the things that I think often gets overlooked is how we care for our people, and particularly the number one thing we need besides clean air and water is food, right? And how that is taken for granted, I believe, is by design. I think racial capitalism typically, tends to I like the invisibilization of labor is key in terms of how it works. And so all of that to say, I'm very proud of the work because it's very important work. I'm proud of the fact that it was extremely hard work and still is. Despite that, we were able to still A, continue, and B, grow into resources that could actually better match the vision of what we set out to do. So what I mean by that is we started with our savings accounts. So mine included. We self-funded a lot, like to bring people together. So I would use contracts that, like, I was a consultant or working different jobs or whatever, and instead of paying me, would use those contracts to bring people together to be able to come to meet, stuff like that. So we're doing by any means necessary, trying to get people in the room to be able to do, because a lot of this consensus building happens in person too. I mean, we do it virtually, but you got to get to the hard stuff in person. So we did a lot. There was a lot of sacrifice to make sure that we were able to bring people together, and to facilitate, to make sure people were heard and synthesize a lot of what folks are saying around the country. And at the time, Black organizing was like disgustingly underfunded, right? And thank goodness for a lot of the organizing that happened to transform or shift philanthropy to actually start considering Black leadership and Black organizing as important. And the work that I'm doing now, to fast forward a little bit, is to continue that trajectory because it's really important. Resources help us be able to do what we need to do, right? Obviously, when we don't have it, it's hard, right? But let me say why I'm also very proud is we were able to do it whether we have resources or not. 1010 highly don't recommend, though, doing it the way that I did it.
Right, right.
We did it. That wasn't easy. And, you know, I think I want to start talking about this more. It almost took me out.
Yes. You were holding the role of executive director,
Yeah, I was holding the
which
role.
you thought was gonna be interim, interim.
Well, it was. I mean, let me say, I started off by being national organizer. I had no intention on being a staff person for the Alliance. I was just doing what needed to be done, when I joined with my counterparts to design this. I'm a designer. I'm a visionary. I can see things, right? And I'm also detail oriented, so I know how to implement as well. But I really wanted to see young people or folks just step up and take this organization. And Ella Baker I'm deeply inspired by Ella Baker in terms of investing in young people's mobilizing and their leadership and really believing in their possibilities. And so that's what I always saw. But it didn't necessarily shake out like that. And they had asked me I was a national organizer, and then they asked me to be executive director. And so I agreed to, but as an organizer, I'm always looking for other leadership, right? And so I was able to meet Dr. Jazz Jackson, who is now the co-director, who made the mistake. This is a joke between us, but she made the mistake of telling me one day she wanted to be executive director. And I was like, oh, got you. And then Cicely Garrett, who I've known for quite some time, who is like a numbers whiz. And she was our grants manager and just really good at fundraising and managing resources. And integrity is really important to me. And so she also helped us start our brand new, what's called MARC, Mutual Aid Resource Council. And she pretty much did that volunteer. We didn't pay her to do that. And so those were really good signs to me that folks were really invested in the vision and the possibilities of the Alliance. And they both expressed interest in after I said, my tank is on E, y'all. I got to tap out. I can figure out a different position, but I don't believe that we always have to be in perpetuity in a particular position. I didn't want to be executive director for life. Bless those folks who do. I don't know how they do it. That just was never my bag. I also think there's something about having new leadership.
Yes.
And new insights. And what I've been able to see after transitioning from my role are, especially in terms of operations and how we managed the organization, far exceeded anything that I anticipated. The fact that they were able to, we had a lot of these conversations around launching an agroecology center at a land grant institution. And I just am so grateful that they just caught the ball and ran with it. And so now we have this beautiful journal. It's called the Land, Food, and Freedom Journal that we just launched. And a lot of that is connected to and comes out of our what's called a Black academics program, Black people who are in the academy and scholars who want to be in service to movement. So we worked together to launch this journal, but their leadership has been incredible and far exceeds, all the things that I even saw, which I think is beautiful. I think it's so beautiful. So I'm really proud of that.
The part that I appreciate is that you went into this role as executive director really to lift things up, get things off the ground, but to have the foresight to say, one, I'm tapped out, okay? Because I think of women of color, we need to exercise that more and be willing to say that. And two, to recognize where your strengths lie. You were a national organizer. Being in the field, that was your thing. By the way, you still use it to help build a bench because you were keeping your eye on talent for the organization. So I feel like when you're so passionate about what you're doing, you're going to find your way to serve. What comes through so strong here is that, all right, I want to serve and I can serve. Here's me knowing me, and this is me knowing that I'm tapped out, but here's a way that I can continue to contribute.
Yeah.
I think that's powerful to know that and know where those strengths lie. But in the meantime, again, that passion is still helping you organize and do what you're good at and pull it together in a way that you guys have a very strong bench.
Yeah, thank you.
Even with you stepping back, let's talk about that. You left the organization resource. And one, let's not say left because you're an advisor.
Yeah, I'm still a part of it.
Yeah, you're still part of the organization. And yes, there was a strong bench.
Yeah.
For me, it feels like, okay, check the things that you intended to do or the spirit behind what you intended to do.
Yeah.
Got honored.
Yeah, and thank you for that. And let me say, there were a lot of rough patches with my like shift out of that position because,
Well, you talked about you did track and there's, passing the baton
yeah,
and sometimes it's shaky.
a little,
Yeah,
little,
yeah.
little, little fumble with the handoff sometimes, on both parts, And, there were many things that I wanted to be able to do for them and with them. The reality is, I always tell people, you know how you're wringing a sponge? My sponge was bone dry, and folks were like ringing, 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 and there is not a drop coming out of that sponge. I could feel it. It was very clear to me that I just was completely out of gas. And so I'm grateful for their diligence. And then also it's not just our co-directors, it's our members. The reality is this was an organization of leaders in the field, right? And so it wasn't about me, even though I was able to offer what I could to the organization, but it's so much greater, right? It's about the people doing really important work and having an ecosystem that is well resourced to be able to have folks share resources together, make decisions, collective decisions around where we go together, and then what needs to happen in terms of infrastructure. And so just deep gratitude to the leadership team and all the folks who stepped up, when I had to step back. There's a Haitian proverb, and I believe it's also Tanzanian as well, that translates to many hands lighten the load. I believe that. And so it's like when we find ourselves out of gas, some of it is on this cultural norm of how we treat Black women in leadership sometimes, and with the expectation, that whole Olivia Pope syndrome of,
Mm,
and handling and doing all the things. We also have to, I have to ask myself, how much am I complicit in that as well? And check myself, which is what I did, and have friends around me who did the same lovingly. It was like, sis, tap out, right? You got to take care of yourself. And one of the things that was so clear to me is that I love my people so much.
yeah.
And I'm a part of that though, too. And I deserve that care as well. So yeah, that was something that was so obvious to me, is that, we need a big bench. We need many hands. This is an enormous amount of work to actually realize if we're really serious about feeding our people, if we're really serious about nourishing our people, if we're really serious about shifting the culture to actually be a healing culture, then we need all hands on deck to do that. And we need to be serious about this work. And there's no way possible it could fall on one person, right? And so, or too much weight on one person. There is a way to do this that is much more manageable. And yeah, and I can see it a little more clearly now.
Curious. I know me in corporate, I'm one of a few. So in terms of the support that I get, I could honestly say out of 18, 20 years in corporate, I don't know that I ever really got the support that I needed to be able to do the things that I did. However, I think there was less of an expectation that it was going to come out of corporations. Inside the organization, do you feel like as a Black female leader, you were supported and you got the type of support that you needed?
Yeah, no, I think that we have to be clear about anti-Blackness, and we have to be clear about sexism and patriarchy. And this, I'm not talking about inside the organization, but that too,
Yeah.
broadly. And as I mentioned earlier, resources weren't coming to us in that way, right? So there was a lot of sacrifice we had to make. So the short of the answer is not really. On the other hand, I will say there was a lot of spiritual support work happening too. And resources in terms of, there was a lot of abundance amongst our members too, right? One member, for example, Dorothy Barker out of North Carolina, they were one of the last dairy farmers in North Carolina. She kept me close in terms of how we manage our books.
Mm,
And then Savvy Horn is an attorney too. So all having these elders, now I've run organizations before. My grad degree was in running nonprofits or was connected to. So I've been trained on how to do this. It was still really great to be able to do this with my elders, also, and learn from them in terms of how they manage organizations as well. So I'm saying all of that to say broadly, no. There was a lot of anti-Blackness that we had to, and also being in the food space as well, right? There was so much anti-Blackness we had to and continue to have to confront in terms of who's the expert too, you know? I
Mm.
remember I was invited to be a keynote, not gonna say what conference, maybe later if I'm feeling a little spicy, but they asked me to keynote and they offered me compensation. And I was like, just out of curiosity, how much did you pay the last white man?
Mhm.
And it was like triple what they were offering me. She was like, nobody's ever asked me that. And I was like, I'm asking you now. So I'm saying all of that to say the devalue, how people devalue folks. And I'm not, yeah, anyway. There's the ample examples of how, white men had been positioned as experts. We were brought in when it came to people of color issues, but when it came to actually building systems, which we know how to do and we've been doing it,
Yes.
or any other kind of topic, we were relegated. A lot of that has shifted from my vantage point now, but we
Okay,
had to do a
good.
lot of fighting for that. Anyway, broad to your question broadly, no, but in some cases, yes. And there was so much abundance. And then our sister organizations too, like Food Chain Workers Alliance, Heal Food Alliance, which I also helped to build, where we all shared insights. We shared bylaws, we shared all kinds of things so that we didn't have to start from scratch. They made sure that we had trainings around how we're making sure that we're thinking about workers' rights as a part of building our platform. Yeah, and so there's a huge sharing economy in our organizations that I'm really proud of too. And I think that should be factored into that question around support as well.
Okay. I'll be more direct.
Okay.
One of the things that you talked about leadership, Black leadership, and I'm thinking particularly of Black women leadership and us being able to ask for and name what we need as far as support. I'm looking at what we've adopted and how we behave, and sometimes we can't see it as clearly. How strongly did patriarchy function inside the organization is a question. I ask that question because I think it's very relevant today. I still think it's a conversation we haven't figured out how to have amongst each other. But when I
Yeah.
think about Black women in leadership, it'd be really lovely to have a counterpart or a partner who really shares in the vision, but can also provide that support. It happens a lot, but I still think there's work to be done in us being able to articulate and name and say what we need and have the expectation that we're going to get it. If you had to name it and say what you would have needed for support or what you would have liked to have more of
Mm.
from your male counterparts, what
Mm.
might that be? And I want to be careful here because we love our men. We know what they've been through. As we set vision and we are evolving and we're owning our power, it's even more critical to be able to partner. And to be able to partner is to really reduce patriarchy.
Mm.
I'm just wanting us to be able to articulate, well, what does that look like in the day to day as
Mhm.
far as support from our male counterparts?
Yeah, let me also top of the mind for me with that is that patriarchy unfortunately can run through all of us, right? And so not just male counterparts, there are a lot of things that a lot of us can adopt regardless of gender, unfortunately, in terms of our expectation and regard for women in leadership, particularly Black women in leadership. There is a lot of turn up that happens amongst folks, quite frankly, um, that I have a lot of question around would they have done the same if I were a man. So that's number one. And I am deeply invested in consensus building and will do a lot of work to make sure that everybody is on the same page. However, there comes a time we have to make decisions, and I'm also very decisive too. There were times where I'm like, we have to do this thing, and it felt like I got a lot of questions.
Mm.
Yeah, when I needed us to go faster. So it slowed up the process quite a bit. And so yeah, those are ways where I think, and that doesn't mean that people don't have the right to question, but my question always is, what is that rooted in? How do you understand me as a competent leader? How do you understand me as having insights and what have you? And so again, a lot of this didn't necessarily just come in male bodies, though.
Right.
Those are things that we have to question in terms of, how we're treating and then how we treat Black organizations, period, and what we expect of them, I think are questions that a lot of folks are asking and how we're taking advantage of the opportunity to like being like this was an organization, quite frankly, that I had dreamed of being able to be a part of, spending decades in white dominant spaces, being subjected to all kinds of things and fighting for all kinds of things to actually be in this space was a dream. I think a lot of folks took that for granted because they hadn't been in those previous spaces. All they know now is what we've created. I'm like, do you know what a privilege this is to be able to have? But it doesn't mean we can't sharpen and be better. But back to your point around patriarchy, it is something that we are going to have to be very diligent about interrogating and understanding how we treat Black women in leadership. And the other thing actually that comes to mind too is the sort of, quote around Black women as mules,
Or Neil Hurston.
right? We have to pay attention to that and the expectations of what we believe Black women should be carrying. That goes back to the many hands thing. It's just, if you were all doing your part as opposed to telling me what I need to be doing, then it would have been a lighter load, right? It wouldn't have weighed so heavy on me. So those are the ways that it showed up. Again, because of the relationships, though, these were conversations, very hard conversations, but conversations we have been and are able to continue, working through. And it's a practice, right? Freedom is a daily practice. Part of that daily practice of freedom is interrogating how we internalized patriarchy, transphobia, all disability, all those ways that we have internalized white dominant, quite frankly, colonial ways of being, and deconstructing that and practicing freedom in ways that are much more nourishing for all of us, So yeah, it's an ongoing practice. It's something that almost took me out. And I think it's important to share that. And what I mean by that is, yeah, I was not well. I was not taking care of myself. Fitness has always been very important to me. Nourishment has always been important to me. Rest, I wasn't able to rest. There was one time where I was sleep deprived so severe. And so all of those things where we need to recognize and pay attention to in ourselves and in each other. Now, because I've been through it, I can recognize it in colleagues and gently say, what can we do to support you so that you can take a break? We have to create ways to be able to support our folks when we need the break. And also, my concern is don't take the break and come back into the same patterns. We got to change. We have to change why you had to take a break to begin with somehow. One of the things I've been really, really interested in is right-sizing our scope of work to our mission and just, scaling that out. But right now, we don't have to do everything right now. How can we prioritize to make sure that our workloads are actually right-sized so that and then our staffing and our capacity actually matches what we say we want to do? Those things are really important to me in order to actually create a sustainable approach to the work in that audit that we need to do, in addition to the patriarchy audits.
Yes.
The anti-Blackness audits, the disability justice audits, all those things, we need to be auditing ourselves in addition to the capacity. Is this something that is manageable for us together? Because I want us to make it. I want us to make it. And I'm going to say this, and I don't mean this to contradict myself. We are strong people, though, right?
Absolutely.
We can do a lot. And we have to understand and be honest about what is actually sustainable for us.
Right. And I think what's critical here and what I love, and you and I sharing this, is that you went back to Zora Neale Hurston and her quote out of Their Eyes Were Watching God is Black women are the mule of the world. I also share in this moment, even if that may have been the truth in the past, can we create a new reality?
Yes. Mm-hmm.
That comes back to the visionary side, the creative side. Also, in terms of even when you're looking at workload, yeah, well, we know we're resilient, but does that mean we have to be pushed to the brink? So how do we right size and manage that, which is also creative, which I love. You got to a point where you said, all right, enough. I got to tap out. Take it from there and bring us into the future. What shifted? What did you realize was important that you absolutely needed? And let's make sure to talk about DJ Dara.
Yay. Awesome. Thank you so much. Let me start by saying once again, just deep gratitude for the members, my leadership team, comrades who encouraged me to actually step back for 6 months. Supposedly, 6 months. I'm saying supposedly because I'm gonna be real honest with you, Trish. Like, I did tap in here and there, because I kind of left my peeps. I was like, I'm out, but I'm here if you need me for, can't find a file, like whatever, whatever. But they were like, you need to actually take time off. I did that. So I'm grateful for that advice to do that. And when I did that, a couple of things. The number one thing I realized is I was off of my health game. Again, moving my body is so important to me. I did sports in high school and then always, was in some kind of fitness in college. And so fitness was always very important to me. That was the number one thing I was like, all right, got to get that back. And so I had a friend introduce, I've always done yoga, but actually introduce a practice that I could have for myself, meaning I didn't need to go to class. I made a commitment that I would develop a yoga practice every day. And I wanted to create a rhythm and a flow so that when I did go back into work, that I already had something that anchored me into my own wellness, right? And so I'll say I'm really grateful for that because I guess 3 years later now, I've done yoga every single day. Like before I do anything, I'm doing yoga. And so I'm grateful for that. It's helped me grounded, very coming from a much more centered place in my leadership and in my observation. The thing about yoga for me is just so much in terms of being present, but also the flow, which brings me into DJing.
Yeah.
Because speaking of flow, so I was actually introduced to DJing about 20 years ago in South Africa, back when, we didn't have the electronic stuff. You was bringing records into the clubs and yes, all of that. Like it was epic. I was with a crew of house DJs in South Africa. I don't know if anybody has not listened to house in South Africa, please stop what you're doing and go check it out. It's amazing. But that was about 20 years ago. Whenever I would facilitate meetings, I would always use my phone I always use music whenever I facilitate anything or bring people together. I remember I would always like slow fade in and out with my phone during meeting. I was like, I need to learn how to do this professionally, like for real. I was like, I want to learn how to blend. And I was like, I want to commit to an art. I think art and creative expression is really important. I think we are meant to be creative beings. We can react to, respond to all day, but we are meant to create in particular ways. You just got to find out what that way is for you. Music, for me, has always been something that has been so transformative and it's meaning making for me. So I found this DJ school in Atlanta. Shout out to my teacher, DJ Jazzy T. I'm a nerd. So yeah, I went through school. I graduated. I had to do a performance live. It was epic. It was so good. It has been the most thrilling, challenging, because it's hard. It ain't easy, but the most exhilarating thing ever. And so DJ Dara was birthed about a few years ago. The name was actually gifted to me by a dear comrade of mine, Allende John Baptiste. I was trying to figure out a DJ name. He was like, what about Dandara? And I was like, let me think about it because Dandara is a real person, Dandara dos Palmares, who was, and I'm going to say is because her spirit lives, a freedom fighter out of the Palenques in Brazil, the Maroon communities who fought against slavery. She was a revolutionary who I was like, I want to lift up her name. So I just thought about it and prayed about it for a bit. I wanted to make sure that it fit. And it just felt so right. It felt such an honor and still feels like such an honor to be able to pay homage to her and other freedom fighters through her name. And just to lift up the fact that women also were at the forefront of fighting for our rights and fighting against slavery. Imagine the bravery that it takes to do that, the fearlessness, or even if you are fearful, you still engage in battle for your freedom. Those are people that we need to be lauding, lifting up, and always remembering. So I'm just grateful to be able to do some things that I love, make people feel good, come together, get a good boogie on, actually dance with each other, right? And pay homage to revolutionaries, which is really important, and which is the energy that we need today more than ever. I'm deeply grateful. I have to admit, be honest with you, Trish, this is confession time. No. There are times that I'm having so much fun, I feel guilty, right? Where there were times. I don't feel that guilt anymore. Let me say that.
Good.
But there were times because I am a movement child. It is grind, grind, grind. It is self-sacrifice. It is for the people, like we got to be da 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 front lines, protesting da da da, and all these things. And militancy and revolutionary offerings look a very rigid, particular way, right? In terms of what I was taught, trained, and ingested. I thought about it and I was like, no, it can look so many different ways. There are so many ways we can contribute to change,
That part.
including the ways in which we are able to build community together. And the back to the like, what does the vision look like? The vision also looks like us being on land with fire, delicious food, and moving our bodies to beautiful rhythm. And to be able to contribute to that via DJing is something that is just so delightful. I'm able to DJ, different conferences. So it's interesting because I'll be at like social justice gatherings and I'm not a panelist. I'm not on the mic. I'm on the turntables, which is bad because sometimes I'm like, I got something to say, but it's okay. I'm gonna be on the turntables right now.
So interesting. Yeah.
It's okay.
You started the practice of yoga. I think I talked to you before my time when I was doing my somatic training and I spent time in Petaluma, California. A lot of activists would come together in that space. It's in that space that I realized activists, they're shaped a specific way, and you just eloquently put it all together. So, okay, how do you move the DJ down Dara? Because it feels lighter. And I'm wondering that yoga practice, because it's a practice in changing the physiology, the body, lightening it up to a certain extent, removing some of the stuff that's stuck in there. How important that practice was bringing you into this transition where you're finding ways to do your activism that is more supportive and generative than maybe some other ways, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, I like the way you said that because I see the connection between yoga and DJing easily, and it's mostly flow, like how we flow from one pose to another. I
Yes.
carry that flow. I even think about that when I'm driving in traffic. It's just, I'm always thinking about flow, like how do you flow with people? So I like the way you described it. The other thing, though, is like, what does it mean to our bodies when we're coming up against and we're fighting against? Let me say this very clearly. I believe in fighting. We have to fight, full stop. And balance is so important to us because, as you said, physiologically, what does it do to our bodies when we're constantly in fight mode? Today, I'm hearing a lot of like fear and like, what does that do to our bodies? It's not good for us, right? And so we have to find ways to take that off. And yeah, balance is going to be really important to us. Quite frankly, we can fight differently too. There are many ways to fight, right? But I just know physiologically, the combative rubbing against that posture will take a toll physiologically. So just thinking about ways of being, and what is really, really, really interesting to me today is flow. How do we flow inside of resilience and the creative imaginations to make those actually reality for our people? Then back to the attention that I mentioned before, like I am really concerned about this attention capture that's happening and then where we're placing it, because energy follows attention, right? If we want a different reality, we're going to have to be careful about where we're investing one of the greatest resources we have, which is our attention and energy. I'm not saying let's not be following news and let's be ignorant, but let's do that in a disciplined way. I'm trying to be really practiced. This is the time where I'm ingesting news and I'm doing it in a way where I'm also like guarded too. I'm like, okay, I know I am coming into this to find out what is happening in the world, right? I want to stay abreast. Absolutely. But this constant social media doom scrolling, just ingesting, it's very unstrategic. It's harmful and it's dangerous. So I'm really concerned about us just having a discipline around where we're spending our energy and attention. And let me also say, if you're constantly reacting to a thing, that thing is controlling you. I'm not saying we don't respond to injustices, because stand up, fight back. And how much energy and attention are we giving to creating and investing in the things that are actually nourishing our people? That's going to take imagination, energy, and resources, including our attention as well. I'm hoping I can use music to do that. I'm also facilitating and coaching and just doing the best I can to make sure that I can support us in this leaderful movement to be as grounded, as studied, as principled, but also as strategic as possible,
Yeah.
including strategic with our energy banks and our attention spans.
I love that. So we're winding down our time together, and this is where I'd like to go into the insights. There was so many peppered. So to try and get them all together for listeners, one of the most like really poignant ones is just this recognition of I need to pause here. I don't have much more to give. That hands down, I think for women of color, us being able to one, notice that the sooner we can notice that even better, but it does require practice. So I love that you were able to say that. Also, that you were able to say that in a supportive environment. So for us to get to know and feel what support looks like and to be able to name it for ourselves, this is what I need, and to be able to articulate it. The insight to have a practice to transition you into this next phase or this next way of being. That's pretty powerful. Practice, practice, practice. Any commitment that we're making to line it up with the practice to help us physically transition into it is so important. This impetus or this desire to move towards, no, Black women are not the mule of the world. I think for us, the invitation is to, what do we replace that with? What are we? The other piece that I picked up on that I think was so important, and I had another guest that also was bringing me to this, that is another insight that you offered, was us looking at how we've internalized patriarchy, us looking at how we've internalized anti-Blackness. I can make a whole list of it, to really come to center and look at first how we've internalized it, to be able to play in a more generative space. What did I leave out? A lot, but anything that you're thinking of right now?
That was great. I love hearing back what you picked up. One of the things I think is important is that quote around many hands making the load lighter, because I think a lot of times folks, some of us feel like we got to do it all. Some folks feel like I can't do anything because I can't do all of that. My point is, if we all did some things, it'd be easier, right? Some of what helped me be able to transition is, folks picking up more of the load. And then inside of that, what I don't think I named was a lot of times we see people who are very capable, sure, but we don't have to let them do all of that, right?
Yeah.
The last thing is, I think you kind of said it's implicit, but when you have to tap out, it's okay, right? Some people may judge. I did. I judged myself, right? There's nothing to be ashamed of. There's nothing to be embarrassed about. The human body is human. We are not machines. We have to feed ourselves. We have to nourish ourselves. We have to rest our bodies when we need to rest our bodies, but we can get back up and we can keep going. So it doesn't have to turn us off to the work altogether. We can find a different place that is more sustainable and suitable for us, but we got to keep going and take the breaks that we need. And there's nothing to be ashamed about that.
Wow. Dara Cooper, thank you. I'm glad you're out there synthesizing all these different ideas, creating in whatever form that you do it. You're also setting the example of how you can do it in a very realistic way. This is what it looks like. So I appreciate that. Thank you for spending this time with me. I hope that you'll check back in at some point, because you're constantly evolving. To keep up with you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for joining me for this episode of Self-Centered Living. If you have enjoyed it and it has been beneficial in any way, I would love to hear from you. Please email me at info@self-centeredliving.com. Our music is Tide Turns by Ketsu. Our show notes include information about our participants. I'll meet you back here for next week's episode. Take care until then.